What's good, everyone? I am back again with another video, but before we begin, how are you all enjoying your break for BEASTMOON? If you didn't know, for the first time ever, kingsisle actually canceled BEASTMOON Monster Mayhem, and it's because of the AOE glitch, which I covered in my last video. Wait, did Gladrocker cancel BEASTMOON? I did expose that glitch. No, they already knew about it. Right? But today, we're not talking about glitches. We are talking about nerfs and buffs, but mostly nerfs. So if you didn't know, in the spring 2022 update, kingsisle had actually balanced a lot of forms. They nerfed a lot, they buffed a lot, and it was the first time they did that in a long time. And I commend them for that. That was a wonderful move. The community is so happy. For such a long time, the community has been speaking up about balance changes, about how forms are broken and need to be fixed for the longevity of the game. And kingsisle listened to us and actually put out amazing balance changes. So fantastic all around, but the game is still not fully balanced. So today, I have some more brilliant ideas on how to balance BEASTMOON forms. This is BEASTMOON Balance Changes Part 2. So, the first form I want to talk about today is Stormwolf. KI nerfed Stormwolf, and they did a pretty good job at it by cutting the damage from 100 DPP to 75 DPP and keeping the blade DPP at 100, but it needs to be nerfed more. Players are still speaking up about Stormwolf, saying that it's still overpowered, and I very much agree. And that's because it could still deal 200 value of damage on round 1 for 2 pips. Stormwolf should not be able to deal 200 value on round 1. And that's because if you're in a 2v2 and you pair that 200 blade on round 1 with your teammate's 200 hit, you're dealing 400 damage on round 1. You could potentially wipe out a small form on round 1 as Stormwolf if you pull that 200 blade. So here's what I'm thinking. We take that 2 pip blade, which is currently at 100 damage per pip, and we nerf it down to 75 damage per pip, just like what happened to the hits. And that way, you can't deal 200 on round 1, which you shouldn't be able to do in the first place if you're a Stormwolf. So again, nerf Stormwolf, posters right there. Storm Colossus should also get a slight nerf. Its 200 blade should be nerfed to 150 as well to match up with the new Stormwolf's damage per pip. And its conditional should also be 75. That way they're pretty even, and one large storm form doesn't have a better 2-pip blade than the other. So that's a great way to balance Stormwolf and Storm Colossus, which are both over the curve, even post-nerf. Post-spring 2022 Stormwolf nerf. So there you go. The next form that deserves to be nerfed is one that I have not talked about in a very long time. And that one is Ice Croc. Ice Croc is falling under the same issue that Death Pig had pre-nerf. Because Death Pig started with 3 pips as a medium-sized form and was able to bust out 200s, one after another on the first 2 rounds. Ice Croc could do the same exact thing. It also has 2-pip 200s. So, because it starts with 3 pips, it could use its 200 shield for 2 pips on round 1, and then it could spam it again on round 2. So you could stack up 200 shields from the get-go. In addition, it also has its evil snowman hit. It's 3-pip, 225 damage hit. You have a ton of these insanely broken options on round 1. You can either stack 200 shields or you could start off with a 225 hit. And keep in mind, you're supposed to be a defensive form. An Ice Croc is an ice form. It's just how it is. I mean, I'm just being logical here. A defensive, medium-sized form shouldn't be able to either stack 200 shields or bust out a 225 on round 1. So, here's what I'm suggesting. kingsisle should do what they did with Death Pig and remove a bonus pip from Ice Croc. That way it would be way more balanced because you'd have a slower start from the beginning of the match and you would not be as menacing. The next 2 forms I want to talk about kind of go together as a pair. I want to talk about the Myth Rat and the Storm Elf. These two forms are completely dominating right now in the Beast Moon meta, especially after some larger forms got nerfed. And that's because they each start with 2 pips and have 2 pip 250 hits, which is nuts. That's crazy damage. If you're in a 2v2 against a Mythrat and a Storm Elf, they could deal 500 collectively on you on round 1. So goodbye, you're done. So here's what I'm assuming is the logic behind this decision currently in the game. As of right now, most large offensive forms can dish out 150 damage for 2 pips on round 1. Most medium-sized offensive forms can dish out 2 pip 200s on round 1. So KI gave small offensive forms 2 pip 250 hits that they could dish out on round 1. But we're not paying attention to the bonus pip limit. If we pay attention to bonus pip limits, it just shows how much more broken these small offensive forms are, because large offensive forms start with 2 pips, medium-sized offensive forms start with 2 pips, and small offensive forms start with 3 pips. That's way too overpowered. So I'm suggesting that we nerf the Mythrat and the Storm Elf's 2 pip 250s down to 2 pips for 200 damage. And it doesn't end there. We should also nerf the AoE spells for 4 pips from 250 value down to 200. That way it's dealing 100 damage per pip on its 2 pip hits and its 4 pip AoE spells. Because come on, a 4 pip 250 damage AoE spell that you can bust out on round 2 is insane. Especially with the Storm Elf where it has a condition. So cut that down to 200 all around and we're good to go. They'd be way more balanced. Let's talk about Balance Croc again. I know it just got a slight nerf, but it's not enough. Here's what I'm suggesting. We take a look at its 1 pip spell. The spell that puts a 125 trap on your enemy and a 50 shield on yourself. Right now that adds up to 175 value for just 1 pip, which is insane. That is so crazy. You could dish out 175 value repeatedly, especially if you buy battle cards for that. You're just spamming 175, 175. I know it's not straight damage, but trust me, it adds up. So here's what I'm suggesting. We change the total collective value of that spell from 175 down to 125. And by doing so, that means we'd be nerfing the trap from 125 down to 75. So bottom line, the 125 trap on Tip the Scales should be nerfed down to 75. That way you're still dealing 125 value for 1 pip collectively. That's still good, especially if you keep using that. You're bulking yourself up with shields, and you're also putting a ton of traps on your opponent. That's really good. Let's talk about Life Drake now. There's a reason players collectively agree that Life Drake is the best life form by far, and that's because of its Resuscitate. It's 0 pip afterlife spell. Currently, it gives 150 health for 0 pips, which is so broken. That's crazy. You can't always get full value on a regular heal spell, because if you cast a heal spell on your teammate that has full health, you're obviously just healing it for 0. However, you will always get full value on an afterlife spell, because it doesn't matter if your teammate has full health. If you cast that on your teammate, as soon as your teammate dies, then they're brought back to life with 150 health. So in my opinion, afterlives in general are far more valuable than regular heal spells. So here's what I'm suggesting. Currently, Life Drake has 150 value for its heal spells. So let's also bring down the heal per pip on the afterlife to match its other heal spells. So I'm suggesting a major nerf to this Resuscitate spell from 150 health down to 50 health. And I know that seems like a drastic nerf, but it's just to keep it true to its 100 heal per pip that it has on its other heal spells. And as it sits right now, 150 is a ton of health for 0 pips, especially on an afterlife. Think about it. That's like the same heal value as its 2 pip heal, you know? So Life Drake would not dominate the other life forms if we nerfed its afterlife spell down to 50 health. Last but not least, there's one more form I want to talk about nerfing, and that's the Death Fairy. The Death Fairy, as it stands right now, is way more overpowered than all 3 other fairy forms. And that's because of its big drain. I know all of you know what I'm talking about. For just 3 pips, that big drain is dealing 225 damage and potentially healing back 225 health. That's crazy. That's 450 value for 3 pips. So I'm suggesting a slight nerf only to its big drain, because the other spells seem fairly balanced. I want the big drain's pip cost to go from 3 to 4. So you're still putting out 225 damage and potentially healing 225 to yourself, which is crazy value. But you can't bust it out on round 1 anymore, which is what all Death Fairy mains do. And that way it'll be much more balanced, and it won't have such a competitive advantage over the other fairy forms. And 450 value for 4 pips is still incredible value, because that's 450 divided by 4, which is 112.5 value per pip. That's good on a small form, especially one that's overpowered right now. So nerf that Death Fairy, KI. The community would be so much happier with these nerfs in place, but also we'd like to see some buffs, because as it stands, there's still some very underpowered forms as well. And the first one I want to talk about right now to get buffed is Fire Minotaur. Fire Minnow's 1 pip cauterize spell is horrible. It's complete garbage right now, because it costs 1 whole pip to just clear a dot and heal over 2 rounds 50. That's so little. And if you compare that to the Stormwolf's Cauterize spell, which clears a dot for a 50 blade, it's far worse for more pips. So I think the solution is pretty simple. Just cut that pip cost from 1 down to 0, and the spell becomes at least a little bit more valuable. It's still not even the best thing ever, but it's still more valuable, because as it stands right now, instant discard every single time. Let's talk about Life Colossus. Even with that health buff in the previous Spring 2022 patch, it's still slightly underpowered. And that's because of the minion condition on some of its hits. Kingsisle's intentions were right, giving its 0 pip bat and 3 pip spider hits a minion-based condition. However, they kind of got it a little wrong, in my opinion, because as it stands, you have to hit a minion directly to pass that condition. And that barely ever happens, because there's very little reason to actually target a minion on the enemy team. Instead, because BEASTMOON is such a damage-focused game right now, you still want to take that minion's caster out as soon as possible. So you're not dealing damage to minions. You're just going to hit that caster over and over. So the condition on the bat and the spider don't really get pulled off much at all. So here's what I think should happen instead. It should follow the new Life Elf's conditions, such that instead of hitting a minion directly, the Life Colossus's hit conditions should be satisfied as long as the enemies have a minion in the first place. So take the bat and take the spider and buff that condition so that it passes as long as the enemy has a minion. That way it'll be much more balanced and usable. Myth Minnow's 6 pip AoE spell, Cursed Medusa, just isn't strong enough. It's dealing 200 damage for 6 pips and a condition, but the condition's not the best. So it doesn't justify such a low amount of damage. So here's what I'm thinking. We buff that spell, Cursed Medusa, from 200 up to 250 for 6 pips. That way it's at least a little bit more balanced, a little bit stronger, and it's not an instant discard. Similarly, the Balance Rat also deserves a buff. Right now, its 6 pip AoE spell also is very underpowered. For 6 pips, you're just dealing 225 damage, and not even a condition as a small form. That's terrible. I'm thinking we have to buff that spell by reducing the pip cost from 6 down to 5. So instead of being 6 pips, it'll be 5 pips to cast that AoE, which will be a lot better for the Balance Rat. And last but not least, we have the Ice Minotaur. Wow, what a contrast between Ice Croc and Ice Minnow. Ice Croc is so overpowered and Ice Minnow is so underpowered. So you can do a couple things here, like maybe even transferring a bonus pip from Ice Croc over to Ice Minnow, but we don't need to touch the pips on Ice Minnow. We can keep it at 2 starting pips and instead work on its pip gain. Because right now, Ice Minnow has so many bulky, heavy pip cost spells, but it has such a hard time gaining those pips in the first place. It doesn't have any 0 pip shields at all, which most other ice forms do, especially the medium and larger sized ice forms. So you could really only use that beetle to gain pips over rounds, which is pretty terrible. If we took Bracing Breeze, its 75 shield and 2 round stun block aura, which currently costs 1 pip, and buffed it, take that pip cost down to 0 pips, that'll be so much better, because now you can kind of stack shields as an ice form should be able to do, instead of just using your 1 pip shields and never gaining pips to even use your other hits. So reduce that Bracing Breeze pip cost from 1 pip down to 0 pips, and now we're talking. Now it's a way better defensive form that can build pips and use some higher pip cost spells. Because let's be honest, right now Ice Minotaur can hardly even use any of its higher pip cost spells, because it's never gaining pips. You're just shielding for 1 pip every single round. So buff that Ice Minotaur Kingsisle, because it is underpowered right now. Really not a good form at all. So there you have it. Those are my brilliant ideas on how to better balance Beastmoon, because right now it's still not totally balanced. I think that spring patch was such a good step in the right direction, but we still have to nerf some of the overpowered forms and buff some of the underpowered forms. These ideas will definitely please the community. I know it's what we all want, so we're speaking up again, and hopefully we'll be listened to again. Catch you in the next video. See you all next time. Peace.